Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. Now we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 6th of June 2019, and the news that would be covered today is given on the screen, and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And so now with this, let us start with the first article. Now we have taken this article from page 10. Now what this article talks about is the recent controversy with regards to the three-language formula. Now what has happened is that the three-language formula under the draft National Education Policy, which was released by the Government of India, introduced a provision for compulsory teaching of Hindi, whereby it had said that Hindi must be taught compulsory as part of the three-language formula. However, what happened was that this provision of compulsory teaching of Hindi was opposed by several states within India. Now, it is within that context that the author highlights various problems with regards to the three-language formula. Now, we're going to understand the problems which has been highlighted by the author with regards to the three-language formula, first from the perspective of GS Paper 1 within the section Indian Heritage and Culture and Society, and secondly from the perspective of GS Paper 2 within the section Social Justice. Now the first problem with regards to the three-language formula which the author has highlighted is that one of the objectives of the three-language formula is that an Indian must have fluency in two Indian languages in addition to English. However, what the author is showing is that even the Hindi-speaking states have not implemented the three-language formula properly, whereby they are also not promoting the inclusion of non-Hindi languages within their states. Now what the author is trying to say is that several Hindi-speaking states such as Haryana, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Bihar and several others are not properly implementing a scheme whereby students within their states would be taught a non-Hindi language. And therefore, according to the author, it is only the southern and the northeastern states which are currently being forced to make their students learn Hindi. However, the Hindi-speaking states are not ensuring that the students within their states are speaking non-Hindi languages, especially of the Northeast or the Dravidian languages. The second problem which has been highlighted by the author is that the language English has evolved into a global language in the field of science and technology, world politics, among other fields. And therefore what is being seen in India is that English is being used as a mode or a mean of achieving higher education, India's engagement with the outside world such as the United Nations, or the engagement of Indian companies with foreign companies. And therefore, according to the author, English has become a language of mobility and empowerment within India. Now, it is within that context that the author has said that English should not be compared with other Indian languages, since Indian languages are languages of identity and cultural expression within India, whereas English within India is used as a mean of mobility and of social empowerment. Now it is this point which explains the title of this editorial, whereby Hindi and English or any other Indian languages should not be compared, whereby English is a means of mobility and of empowerment within India, since the knowledge of English allows Indians to connect themselves to the global world in terms of higher education, especially in science and technology, of world politics, especially in world institutions such as the United Nations, among other aspects of mobility and of empowerment. Whereas according to the author, the Indian languages are an expression of cultural identity. Therefore, according to the author, English and Indian language have a different purpose for the Indian citizen and therefore should not be compared with each other. The third problem highlighted by the author is that several states within India, such as Bihar, had opted for Telugu as a third language, whereas the state of Haryana had opted for Tamil as a third language, whereas the state of Andhra Pradesh chose Hindi as their third language. However, what has been seen is that every state within India over time has de-emphasized the third Indian language formula. Now, the main reason, according to the author, as to why states within India are de-emphasizing the three-language formula is that it does not provide the students with any skills that are required for employment or higher education within the future. So what is being seen is that after learning their native tongue and English, the parents are wanting their children to learn a foreign language as their third language, such as French or Spanish. And the main reason that parents want their children to learn a foreign language such as French or Spanish is that it provides them with better employment and higher educational skills. The fourth point highlighted by the author is that some states within India have imposed a one language formula whereby the administrative work of the state government is carried out in the local language, and similarly the government schools within the states only teach the local language. Now, what the one language formula has done is that it has caused the citizens within the states, especially students, to be at a disadvantage compared to those students of other states in which they have learned a second language, especially English. Now, the fifth and the last problem, which has been highlighted by the author, is that the main objective in post independence India was to replace English with Hindi as India's link language. However, according to the author, it must be understood now that this objective of replacing English with Hindi within India as a link language cannot be achieved. So now hopefully up till here you understood the five main problems which have been highlighted by the author with regards to the three language formula. Now it is within that context that the author has given one recommendation, whereby the author has said that India should introduce English throughout schools and colleges within India. And India then should follow a two-language formula whereby Indians have the ability to communicate within their mother tongue and also in English. Whereby according to the author, the three-language formula is not required. Whereby according to the author, the ability to communicate within English and within your own native language should be sufficient for India. And it is based on this recommendation that the author has also said that several states, especially the northeastern states and the southern states, should work together to ensure that the three-language formula is not implemented, and they should ensure that the two-language formula based on the native language and English should be applied to their states. So now hopefully you've understood the main problems which have been highlighted by the author with regards to the three-language formula. And moreover, hopefully you also understand the recommendations given by the author that the non-Hindi states should ensure a two-language formula in which the English language and the native language should be promoted. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 11. Now this editorial contains two main aspects, whereby the author first highlights the various problems with regards to solar manufacturing within India. And the second aspect that the author highlights are various solutions that can be undertaken, especially those initiatives which have been undertaken by China so as to improve manufacturing of solar products within India. Now the first aspect that the author highlights is with regards to the background of solar energy within India, whereby the author has said that the unit cost of solar power which can be produced within India has fallen dramatically, whereby India has one of the lowest unit cost of producing solar power within the world. Apart from this, India has also expanded its solar generation capacity over 8 times, whereby it was around 2600 megawatts in 2014, which has now risen to around 28 gigawatts in 2019. Apart from this, one of the initial objectives that was set up by the Government of India was a target of 20 gigawatts of solar capacity by 2022. However, this target of achieving 20 gigawatts of solar capacity has already been achieved by India, whereby in 2015 the target was changed to include 100 gigawatts of solar capacity by 2022. Now, it is within that context that the author is saying that because of the rising importance of solar power within India, India needs to have a solar manufacturing strategy. Now, the problem highlighted by the author as to why India has a weak solar manufacturing within India is that India is heavily dependent on low-cost Chinese imports, whereby what is being seen is that India imported 90% of its solar products from China in 2017. Now, because China is able to export solar products at a very low cost, India has become dependent on Chinese imports. And because India has become so much dependent on low-cost Chinese imports, India has not been able to form a domestic solar panel manufacturing industry, whereby what has happened is that India's domestic industry are not able to compete with the low-cost Chinese imports. So now hopefully you also understood as to why India does not have a developed solar panel manufacturing industry within India. Now it is within that context that the author has given various solutions that can be undertaken so as to improve and form an effective solar panel manufacturing industry within India. Now the author has highlighted that there are four main aspects with regards to the supply chain of solar photovoltaic panel manufacturing or solar PV panel manufacturing. Now, according to the author, India does have an established industry with regards to solar wafer manufacturing and PV module assembly. However, it is with regards to silicon production and the production of silicon ingots that no major Indian company is currently involved in. Now, to improve silicon production and the production of silicon ingots within India, what is required is that Indian companies invest in improving the technical expertise of human capital and also in improving the technological capabilities. Now, apart from this, what the author has also highlighted is that the capital which is required to have production facilities for silicon and the production facilities for silicon ingots requires much more money as compared to setting up an industry with regards to solar wafer manufacturing or PV module assembly. And therefore, one of the main reasons as to why India does not have an established industry with regards to silicon production and silicon ingots because it is a capital intensive industry. And therefore, according to the author, one of the main things that is required is that government support in terms of capital investment. The second solution which the author has highlighted is of a safeguard duty. Now let's say a solar panel which has been imported from China costs rupees 100 and the solar panel which has been manufactured within India may be costing rupees 150. And therefore what this does is that it makes the Chinese import more competitive as compared to the domestic industry. But what would happen under a safeguard duty is that the government of India would impose a duty on the import of solar panels. And because of this duty that has been imposed on Chinese imports, this solar panel would now be costing rupees 160. And therefore what this does is that it makes the solar panels which have been produced within India more competitive. Now you need to understand that India has already imposed a safeguard duty with regards to import of solar panels. The third solution highlighted by the author is to have investment within greenfield projects. Now, one of the ways in which greenfield projects can be initiated by the Government of India is by stimulating such projects through public procurement. Therefore, what the author has recommended is that the government can issue bids for solar power plants and only Indian companies can bid for such tenders. Whereby what the Government of India can do is ensure that the bids are long enough, whereby they might be of a 5 to 10 year project. And what this would allow is that the manufacturing companies can take maybe up to 5 years to set up their greenfield projects, and the Indian government after 5 to 10 years can ensure through public procurement a compulsory buying of solar manufacturing products from such greenfield projects. Now, the fourth solution highlighted by the author are various initiatives or steps which the Chinese government has undertaken that can be replicated by India. The first of these lessons is that India needs to develop a core competence within solar technology manufacturing. Now, an example of this would be the commercial automobile industry within India, whereby there are several Indian companies such as Mahindra, Maruti, and others which are capable enough to manufacturing every part of a car that is required. And it is within that context that the author is saying that India should develop core competence, which is one of the initiatives that China undertook, whereby the Chinese government ensured that Chinese companies are able to produce silicon ingots, also have capabilities for solar wafer manufacturing and PV module assembly, whereby they ensured investment within human knowledge and with regards to technological capabilities. And this is one of the steps that is required to be undertaken by India, that India needs to develop core competencies to have a proper solar manufacturing industry within India. The second point, which has been highlighted by the author in the form of Chinese lessons that can be undertaken by India, is that India can ensure subsidized land acquisition, access to raw material, easier labor and export laws, whereby India can ensure that the solar manufacturing industry within India is able to compete with the global products. Now, one of the ways through which China was able to reduce the cost for its solar manufacturing industry was by decreasing the cost of capital, and this is one of the third lessons which India can undertake from China. Now, what is being seen in India is that any company which wants to set up a solar manufacturing plant within India may take a loan from a public sector or a private sector bank. But what is currently happening is that the interest rate on these loans might be from 9 to 10%. Now, what the Chinese government did is that when Chinese companies wanted to set up various industries with regards to solar manufacturing, it ensured that they are provided loan at 4 to 6%. And therefore, what is being seen is that China was able to reduce the cost by reducing the cost of capital. But what is happening in India is that for Indian companies to set up manufacturing plants with regards to solar manufacturing, they have to undertake a very high capital cost. Now, the fifth and the last solution, which has been highlighted by the author, is that the Indian government has already allowed 100% foreign investment within the solar manufacturing industry. Apart from this foreign investment also qualifies for automatic approval. Now, what this means is that the government of India has decreased the amount of paperwork that is required for foreign companies to invest in solar manufacturing within India. Now, these are the five main solutions that has been highlighted by the author, which India can undertake so as to improve its solar manufacturing industry. Now, this editorial and the explanation given in this section should be seen from the perspective of GS Paper 3 within the section Economic Development and within the subsection Indian Economy and Issues Relating to Planning, Growth and Development, and also within the subsection Infrastructure. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 9. Now what is required to be understood from this article is quite small and is given in the article itself. Now the first aspect that you need to understand is what is gestational diabetes. Now gestational diabetes is defined as any degree of glucose intolerance with the onset or the first recognition during pregnancy. So in the simplest of terms, it means signs of sugar during pregnancy. Now the article has also highlighted the various risks that are associated which might be caused due to gestational diabetes. The first risk is of low birth weight of the baby. The next risk is of obesity, hypertension and cardiovascular diseases. Now the fifth and the last risk with regards to gestational diabetes is intergenerational transfer of risk, meaning that the baby might also get sugar from the mother itself. Now it is within that context that it has been said that every pregnant woman should be screened for high blood glucose, irrespective of the fact whether the mother is showing any symptoms of sugar or not. Now according to this article, the ideal blood sugar level for an expecting mother should be at 90 during fasting and 120 after eating food. Now within India, the Ministry of Health has already developed national guidelines for testing, diagnosis and management of sugar within pregnancy. Now the Ministry of Health has already recommended early testing of sugar during the first trimester. Now these are the main points that you need to remember from this article and are required to be understood with regards to your prelims examination. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 13. Now what has happened is that the Indian Navy has launched an environmental program known as the Indian Navy Environment Conservation Roadmap. Now under this environment conservation plan, the Indian Navy is going to reduce its energy consumption and ensure environmental sustenance within all the ships that the Indian Navy has and all of its shore establishments, meaning the various bases that the Indian Navy has on land. The second point of the plan is that the Indian Navy has pledged 1.5% of its work budget towards renewable energy generation. The third part of this plan is that the Indian Navy is going to ensure that about 24 megawatt of energy is produced by solar photovoltaic projects, whereby what the Indian Navy is going to ensure is that both rooftop and land-based solar panels are formed under the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. The fourth point is that the Indian Navy is going to form pilot projects in which it is going to utilize wind energy to form electricity. Apart from this, the Indian Navy is also planning to promote the use of biodiesel and replace the high-speed diesel that it currently uses. Now the fifth and the last point that you need to remember about this plan is that the Indian Navy is going to ensure the planting of trees at various naval stations. Apart from this, it is also going to ensure segregated waste collection and improved waste management in all of its ships and shore establishment. Now, apart from this, there's some related fact that you also need to know. That what has happened recently is that India signed an agreement within London which intends to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions by at least 50% from the shipping industry by 2050. Now, this reduction of 50% would be based on the 2008 levels. Now, this international agreement with regards to reduction of carbon dioxide emissions from the shipping industry is being led by the International Maritime Organization, which is an organization of the United Nations. Now, you need to know that international shipping almost accounts for around 2% of global CO2 emissions. However, the greenhouse gas emissions from ships and including aircrafts are not mentioned currently within the Paris Agreement. Now these are three related points which you need to remember, which the Government of India is going to undertake as an environmental conservation plan with regards to the shipping industry. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 15. Now what is required to be understood from this article is about the PMI Index. Now the PMI Index has already been covered in depth by Basava sir in the Daily News Simplified video of 2nd of March. Now the link to this video is given in the description section given below, and you can refer to this video to further understand about the PMI Index. However, what we're going to do today is again revise about the PMI Index through questions for practice. Now there are two questions for your practice, and what you need to do is pause this video, solve both of these questions, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to question number 1 is C, both 1 and 2. Whereby the Purchasing Manager Index or the PMI Index is released by Nikkei, whereby reading over 50 means an expansion within the economy, whereas a reading below 50 means a contraction within the economy. Now with regards to question number 2, the correct answer is B, 2 and 3. Now with regards to statement number 1, the PMI Index only measures private industries, whereby the Index of Industrial Production measures both public and private sector companies. Now with regards to statement number 2, the Purchasing Manager Index only does cover the services sector, while the IIP covers both the services and the manufacturing sector. Now the IIP is used in GDP calculation within India, whereby the Index of Industrial Production is published by the CSO. Therefore the correct answer to question number 2 is B, 2 and 3. Now we have taken this article from page 13. Now what this article talks about is that India and France are going to conduct a mega air exercise. However, what is required for us to understand from this article are the various military exercises between India and France, and we're going to understand them through a question for practice. Now what you need to do is pause this video, solve this question, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is A, 1 and 2. Now the Indian and the French Air Force conduct the Garud military exercise, while the Indian Navy and the French Navy conduct the Varuna military exercise, while the Indian Army and the French Army conduct the military exercise known as Shakti, while it is the Indonesian Army and the Indian Army which conduct the military exercise known as Garud Shakti. And it is within that regard that the correct answer is A, 1 and 2. Now there are two more questions for your practice, and as you already understand, pause this video, solve both of these questions, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to question number 4 is B, 1 and 2, whereby the Government of India does have a monopolistic buyer of solar manufactured products within India. While statement number 2 is also correct, that China accounts for 90% of imports of solar products within India. However, it is statement number 3 which is incorrect, whereby India does not have a domestic industry in silicon production from silicates and the production of solar grade silicon ingots. Now with regards to question number 5, the correct answer is B, 2 only. Now with regards to statement number 1, the shipping industry accounts for around 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Now with regards to statement number 2, India has recently signed an agreement with the International Maritime Organization, whereby India intends to reduce CO2 emissions by at least 50% based on 2008 levels from the shipping industry by 2050. And now with this we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.